It is just the latest book to reveal the inner workings of the Trump campaign and presidency. The author this time around, former New Jersey Governor Christie. Here's how he describes watching that infamous Access Hollywood tape alongside then Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, saying, "The tape was hard to watch. It was harder to listen to, but we watched and listened to the Access Hollywood video all the way to the end." The words sounded crude and vulgar playing through the small speaker on Hope Hicks's laptop, even more so with Donald sitting there with us. He goes on to say people started proposing phrases to quote Trump as saying, "Many years ago, Bill Clinton has said far worse to me on the golf course. I apologize if anyone was offended." And according to Christie, as Trump's team was brainstorming about how to respond to the tape, it was Trump who offered what he said was the best line. Remember locker room talk? Matt Katz is a Christie biographer. He's the author of American Governor Christie's Bridge to Redemption and also a reporter for WNYC Public Radio. So, Matt, interesting to have all of these little tidbits in the book. Yeah. Were you surprised at all that he included that particular episode?
No, because the whole book is about how Christie himself was in the room during these very important moments. Christie presents himself as a critical cog in the Trump machine, particularly during the campaign, and he also presents himself as the adult in the room. So with the Access Hollywood situation, he talks about how he's batting down all these terrible damage control ideas from Jared Kushner and Steve Bannon, and instead he gives Trump ultimately the best advice about how to deal with the situation. And then following when the tapes release, he goes and does this debate with Hillary Clinton, where following Christie's advice, he's able to, control the situation, and he does pretty well. Trump thinks he does pretty well, and he calls Christie and thanks him. He says, "I can't thank you enough." And there's several anecdotes about that. Whenever there's trouble in Trump world, Trump can call Christie, and Christie's the adult in the room because everybody else is a bunch of idiots. I mean, that's basically what Christie's saying throughout this book.
I feel like you're almost using his language there with everybody else is a bunch of idiots.
Yeah, I'm trying to personify him a bit, yeah.
Right, listen, you spent a lot of time studying the man.
Yes, that's true.
This is definitely not surprising that he really rips Jared Kushner's dad, but he's also been, talking about it in his interviews. Let's listen to a little bit of that.
Would you separate your experience if your father had been put in jail from the prosecutor who put him in jail?
If my father was guilty, I would. Mr. Kushner pled guilty. He admitted the crimes. And so what am I supposed to do as a prosecutor? I mean, if a guy hires a prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law and videotapes it and then sends the videotape to his sister to attempt to intimidate her from testifying before a grand jury, do I really need any more justification than that? I mean, it's one of the most loathsome, disgusting crimes that I prosecuted when I was U.S. attorney.
Laying out the details
pretty
there.
Harsh word. Yep. Yeah, that's right. I mean, these guys go way back. Christie, when he was U.S. attorney, prosecuted Jared Kushner's father. And, this is more than Christie has said about this case ever, just in the last few days and in the book. I mean, he had been telling us over the last couple of years that him and Jared were getting along fine, that things were going well. But this book is essentially a way to go after Jared as much as possible. He believes that Kushner blocked him from becoming vice president of the United States, attorney general of the United States. He says Kushner fired him, was the reason why he was fired as the transition chairman. And he says because he got fired as transition chairman, that's why the whole administration went to hell, essentially. He's saying that he had all these great ideas and these great people that Trump could have surrounded himself with, but because Kushner had this grudge against him for sending his old man to prison back in the day, then the result was that all the good ideas that Christie presented were thrown in the trash, literally. Christie says that Kushner and his crew threw out literally binders filled with information and transition team materials when firing Christie, and then they surrounded themselves with what Christie described as a bunch of grifters. And he says that's why things in the administration have not always gone so well. It's because that Christie was pushed aside by Kushner's old grudge, and everybody else filled that vacuum.
We don't have time to listen to the full sound, but one of the things that was fascinating today was that Christie talked about how the president called him once. He was on The View today and talked about how the president called him and apologized. Those aren't stories that we hear about the president very often. Why do you think he's telling that story?
They have a very unique relationship. I mean, he tells that story because he repeatedly in the book says that he's closer to the president than anybody else not in Trump's family. And that's one example of that. They've been friends for 15 plus years, and he says that Trump repeatedly has told him, "I love you." The reason why he apologized, Christie says Trump apologized, was because Trump went after Christie on the campaign trail about Bridgegate. Trump said that Christie knew about Bridgegate, the scandal that brought down Christie's political career, essentially, and essentially, therefore, had committed a federal crime. After that, Trump called Christie and apologized, and Christie accepted the apology. He then, weeks later, endorsed Trump. So they have this very unique friendship, and part of what Christie tries to do in the book is say that Trump is misunderstood, and that he's just been surrounded with bad people, and other than that, he's a good guy with a big heart, and he could be a good president, could be a great president. That's the argument he makes.
Interesting, Matt. We have not seen much reaction from this president on the book. We'll see if that changes at all. Matt Katz, good to have you here. Thanks.